What's going on, everybody? Aiden from Birds vs. Boys here, and we are about 1 month away from the NFL draft. And you know what that means? It is the peak of mock draft season. So, what I wanted to do tonight is go through a culmination of mock drafts. What are the experts saying about who the Eagles are going to take? The people that are in the know, the people that are at the combine, the people that are at the Senior Bowl, the people that have connects within the front office. Who are they saying the Eagles are going to take? I've compiled a few different ones of different analysts with a few different players. So we're going to go through their mock drafts or who they have the Eagles taking number 32 overall, and then talk a little bit about that player, how I feel about them, and if I agree with that analyst and if that would be a good fit for the Eagles. So I have four different ones and four different players. I say there's a bunch of mock drafts, but these four players you've seen a ton. You'll probably recognize the names as soon as I say them tonight, but I just wanted to go over all of them and make sure everybody was on the same page. So let's start, and this one is important, with Daniel Jeremiah. He has the Eagles taking Shamar Stewart, the edge rusher from Texas A&M, at pick 32. Now, why I chose Daniel Jeremiah? I think certain analysts have certain inside sources with certain front offices. And over the years, I've noticed that Daniel Jeremiah always seems to be in tap and in tune with what the Eagles are doing and nailing them in his mock drafts. And then I figured out why last year. He told a story that Howie Roseman was texting him on draft night, asking him to talk less about Jalen Hunt so the Eagles could take him. So I thought to myself, oh, that's why he's so in tune with what the Eagles are doing. He's literally going straight to the source of who's taking the players for the Eagles and Howie Roseman. So I think his mock draft is really important because he can go straight to the source in Howie Roseman. So Shamar Stewart overall, I really, it's a position of need at edge rusher, obviously. So Nolan Smith and Jalen Hunt are going to be your starters, but they lost Brandon Graham to retirement. They lost Josh Sweat to the Cardinals in free agency. And they would tell Bryce Huff to get lost if they could. But regardless, it's a position that they need more guys. And I think with Jalen Hunt and Nolan Smith, those two guys are speed rushers. And we love that about them. But they are exactly what it sounds like. Get to the quarterback as quickly as possible. What's different about Shamar Stewart is his ability to impact the run game, and he plays the run very well at the edge position. I think that's something that the Eagles have needed, and a lot of people have talked about this. They need some pop at that position. They need some muscle, some brunt that Brandon Graham would bring for them. So I think Shamar Stewart would fill that. I like that they brought in Azeez Ojulari, but I think that's a really good depth piece. Like, I think he will rotate in behind Jalen Hunt and behind Nolan Smith, especially two guys like them who have never played like full-time starter roles for 17 games plus playoffs. We believe in them, but we haven't seen that type of sample size yet. So I think that's a position that matters, and having some extra muscle at the position definitely helps them. Now, Shamar Stewart himself, very young. He's still just 21. He'll turn 22 during the season. So I think that's something that the Eagles usually keep an eye on. This is what matters. And the Ringer Fantasy Football Show, they turned it into a draft show. They did a good job explaining this. The Eagles have a $500 million roster, and they paid $250 million for it. Now, what that means is you've got guys like Jalen Carter, who, if they hit free agency tomorrow, would be getting Myles Garrett money, but they have him on a rookie contract. They have Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell, who, if they hit free agency tomorrow, would be worth so much more than what we pay them. So the Eagles like to get these guys where they're on the rookie deal and you're maxing out their rookie deal at a young age. So young and cheap is the way to go. Shamar Stewart at pick 32 gives you the extra fifth year option. He'll be 25 by the time you're in year 5. Really young, so there's a lot to tap into with his potential, and you would control him at that age for quite some time. So I think that's something that the Eagles do put a lot of emphasis on. Now, Todd McShay, I know we're not talking about his mock draft, but he did say that Shamar Stewart was the best player at the Senior Bowl. The Senior Bowl is another thing. Usually when these guys pop up there, if you go back and watch like rising stars from the past few years, it seems like the Jalen Hunt, I think, was one of them last year. Milton Williams a few years ago. They were both like did really well at the Senior Bowl. Then all of a sudden they pop up on the Eagles. I wonder why that is. It's feeling like they're putting a lot of emphasis on when you go to the Senior Bowl and when you're playing with other guys at your position, who's the best of the best. They seem to care about that. One red flag for Shamar Stewart, and maybe it's just my personality. I care about production, the eye test of can you ball or can you not ball? It goes for any sport. And Shamar Stewart doesn't have a lot of tackles for loss. I think he had 10 or 11 in his entire career. He has 4.5 sacks in his entire career. So you're really basing this off potential versus product. And there is a lot to like, but I am very, very keen on guys who've produced. I can look at that. There's a tangible proof that you can play your position well, and I can see it in the statistics. I can see it on tape. You are an edge rusher. You got to the quarterback. You got from point A to point B successfully many times in college, and you don't really have that with Shamar Stewart. So that's the knock on him right now. But if Daniel Jeremiah is saying it, I am going to listen. All right, David Hellman, the next one. He works for Fox Sports. He went with the same position, but a different player. He went with James Pierce from Tennessee. James Pierce, this is a really interesting one. You don't really have to be an analyst to know anything about James Pierce. Watch him. Probably one of the most explosive athletes in the draft, regardless of position. You watched him at the combine. He ran one of the best 40 times. He ran in a hoodie, which I thought was hilarious. He ran like a 440, I think, 40-yard dash, like something crazy for an edge rusher. So the athleticism and explosiveness. I just talked about Shamar Stewart, how I like to see people especially at the edge rusher position. Did you get to point A to point B successfully a lot of times in your career? Okay, yes, you did. All right, sign me up. So that obviously sticks out a lot when you're talking about James Pierce, is he was really explosive, really athletic, got to the quarterback quite a lot. I am worried, though. This was a kid, if you remember last year, in May, everyone does their way too early mock draft. And I guess they were way too early because a lot of people had James Pierce as number one overall, going first overall next year. And now 1 year later, Abdul Carter is in the place that James Pierce was supposed to be. And James Pierce is now a fringe first round pick that's getting mocked pick 32 to the Eagles. What happened this year that all of a sudden he goes from next up being the next coming of Myles Garrett to now falling all the way to pick 32 potentially for the Eagles? Should that be a point of concern for us all, that his season did not pan out, that he would be a top 5 pick? And then obviously the character concerns thing. People are going to bring this up. You're going to hear it all draft night. I don't know what the character concerns are. That's a buzzword that people like to throw around with some of these kids. I don't know what he did. I don't go to Tennessee. I'm not from Knoxville, and I'm not connected enough to know if it's fights, if it's grades. I don't know what he did. So I kind of tread lightly. The one thing when you're doing this style is you don't get to talk to these kids. You can watch the tape. I can watch hours on YouTube, but you don't actually get to talk to them. So you don't actually know their character. I don't know anything about James Pierce, the person. I only know James Pierce, the player. So that's kind of really hard to tie in when you're doing mock drafts like this. And a lot of people have been saying, if you go to Theo Ash's page on TikTok, he does a lot of breakdowns. I think he does a pretty good job. He was talking about James Pierce, and all the comments are like, future Eagle. He was written in stars to be an Eagle. This feels like the most Eagles pick of all time because he has really, really high potential, explosive athleticism at that position, and then has the character concerns. And there are a few things like, yeah, the Eagles are willing to take on people who have character concerns. But when we're talking about that, let's just say it. Jalen Carter had character concerns coming out of Georgia, but he also was considered the most talented player in the draft. Like, there were no questions at all about his potential on the field. His production was there. He was on a really good defense. He shined in every possible moment that he could have at Georgia. So the only reason he fell down the board is because of character concerns. It feels like Pierce, there are other things involved beyond the character concerns that are making him fall. Does he need to refine his pass rushing skills? Is he really just too much of a power rusher without anything else to go to? Does that scare some teams away? So when we talk about the character concerns, the Eagles were willing to waive it with Jalen Carter because they saw him as the next Aaron Donald. I don't know if they see James Pierce as the next Nolan Smith. So that's going to be an interesting one to keep an eye on. I think a team will probably fall in love with him in the 20s anyways. All right. Eric Edhelm, he is the lead NFL.com draft guy. So I wanted to bring him in because I think at NFL.com, obviously you have a lot of connections. And I thought he had a really interesting one because his involved a trade. He had the Eagles moving up from pick 32 to pick 24 and drafting Malachi Starks out of Georgia. He's a safety. Now, I wanted to bring this one up because of all the ties, right? There's a lot of things here that you hear with the Eagles a lot. Number one, he went to Georgia. Number two, he's a safety. That's a position of need that they're probably going to target after Chauncey Gardner-Johnson was traded to the Texans. And then also with him, the trade up aspect of this, trading from 32 to 24. The Eagles have been very aggressive trading up in recent years. They traded up for Devontae Smith. They traded up for Jalen Carter, who we just mentioned. Last year, they traded up for Cooper DeJean, got all the way to pick 40 to get him. So they are obviously always willing to sacrifice some picks to get aggressive on the draft board and move up if they want to target a guy. Now, they have a lot of comp picks. They have a ton of picks coming up between this year and next year. Do they get aggressive on the board knowing that they have 21 picks over the next 2 years and 21 guys aren't going to be on this team come 2025? We can't utilize all 21 picks. So do they use those picks to trade up for a guy like Malachi Starks? Now with Starks, what I really like about him, and it kind of reminds you of Reed Blankenship, is the instincts. Like when you're watching him at Georgia, it feels like he knows where the ball is. He knows how to get to the ball quickly. Things that you love with a safety. And then I think the knock on him the most is like when you hear all these analysts talk about it, it's like, well, when he was in the slot, he could get lost a little bit. And it's like, well, we wouldn't have to worry about that with the Eagles because we don't need him in the slot. We need him playing at a safety position deep over the top because Cooper DeJean is going to anchor that slot position. And then even if Cooper DeJean were to get injured or you had to bounce him outside, you'd probably be playing Sidney Brown at that slot corner instead of Malachi Starks. So that if that's the main concern with Starks, I don't think that's a main concern for the Eagles, and it's something that you don't really worry about. Now, let's talk about the Eagles' overall draft strategy. I'm just going to nail this home and hammer this home from this is the end of March. We'll end it to the end of April. They care about the trenches. They care about the trenches more than any team. They build through the infrastructure. We talk about this on our show relentlessly. So the idea of them taking a safety, I won't believe it till I see it. That's no knock on Malachi Starks. That's no knock on his ability to play safety or wherever on the field. It's just hard for me to see the Eagles using a first-round pick on a safety, especially in a draft. They always covet offensive line and defensive line, but now it's a position of need. They need edge rusher. They need another defensive tackle. They need offensive line depth. So all these positions that they care about a ton, all of a sudden, the year that they all become a position of need simultaneously, they're going to magically go to safety. I will believe it when I see it. All right. And then the last one, I went local. So I wanted to get somebody who was actually on the Eagles beat, not a national reporter. All respect to those guys. But I wanted to get an Eagles beat reporter here. So I went to The Athletic. Brooks Cabana. He did a mock draft this week for the Eagles. He did a full 7-round mock draft. We'll focus on his first-round pick. And this name is a buzz name because I think I've seen a lot of this kid going to the Eagles when I did my first mock draft. This is who I selected for them. It is Walter Nolen, the defensive tackle from Ole Miss. There's a lot to like about him. Of one, very explosive at the defensive tackle position. You could see him being a replacement for Milton Williams. This is obviously a position need. They love Moro Ojomo, but still, just like at edge rusher, we need some more help there. I had some help. We need to get those more guys in there, and I think Nolen could really, really fill in there. Really good in the trenches, constantly getting himself into the backfield. Who's that sound like? Milton Williams, Jalen Carter, these guys that really just bull rush their way constantly into the backfield. And I touched earlier on Shamar Stewart and how production kind of, if it's not there, it bothers me a little bit, and it could be a red flag for me. With Walter Nolen, going back to can you ball or can you not ball? Here's how I know. The Ole Miss defense set a record for tackles for loss a year ago. A lot of that was Walter Nolen. So I can look at that defense and see the impact that he had, see that he got himself in the backfield. And it's not just like on tape, he has some twitch and some bend, and you throw all these buzzwords around. It's like, well, if he refines his skills and he gets with the right coaching staff, he'll be in there, he'll be successful, he'll refine his game, and then he'll get into the backfield. No, I know it right now. I watched Ole Miss. They set a record for tackles for loss in a season in school history. I know Nolen was capable of doing that because he did. And he also had an incredible Senior Bowl. So, again, that's something that the Eagles care about tremendously. Now, this kid, this is the most fluctuation I see of anybody. It's crazy because he had a great Senior Bowl and you were seeing him get selected overall. I saw as high as pick 8. I saw him at pick 16. And then you see a lot of mock drafts, and it happened to me in the mock draft that I did. He fell all the way to 32. So I have no range on this kid. We're either getting a steal of the century and pulling off another heist town edition, and Howie Roseman's going full Ben Affleck and pulling off another robbery in Showerstown and ending up with Walter Nolan, or this kid's not even going to be close to the Eagles and going off the board with a top 15 pick. I have no idea. So that's it. Those are the 4 that I wanted to target tonight. What the experts are saying the Eagles are going to do come draft night. I think all of them provided a little variety, both in their plan for the Eagles and their player for the Eagles. So we will be back with a ton more draft covers. We're going to do our own mock drafts. We're going to do our own player breakdowns. We're going to probably have some people on to interview them about what they are hearing about the draft. So we have a ton more draft coverage to come. Make sure to subscribe here on Birds vs. Boys YouTube. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers before the draft, and make sure to follow us on TikTok as well at Birds vs. Boys Pod. And we'll be back later this week for more draft content. We'll talk to you guys soon.
Chris Hansen here, and I'm going to need you all to take a seat right over there and check out Birds vs. Boys.
I think you're completely right here, and I hate it.
Yep. Hey, idiots. Stop doing dumb things.
I got 2 phones.
Upside alert. Upside alert.
I might go insane.
I think you're already there. There's no hope. Hope is gone.
If this was an AFC North podcast, we'd be done in 15 minutes.
Bob Hope.
I'm going to drink bleach.
That is the team you promised me you were going to be this year.
This is the Consciously Hopeful podcast.
I'll be watching.